Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan Troxel, and in this episode, I welcome Marlene Chen and Blair Payson of Olson Kundig. Marlene is a principal, owner, and chief operating officer at the firm, where she has steered operations and governance since joining in 2005. Blair is also a principal and owner, a self-described maker who served as project architect on the Space Needle renovation and has grown into the role of shepherding the firm's conversation around technology and AI. Between them, they help lead a practice of roughly 300 people across Seattle, New York, and Chicago, doing work that ranges from small cabins in Wyoming to large-scale hospitality, higher ed, and cultural projects all over the world. If you don't know Olson Kundig by name, you almost certainly know the work: Tom Kundig's Kinetic Houses, the Space Needle renovation with its revolving glass floor, the Gates Foundation Visitor Center. It's a firm that, in Blair's words, doesn't naturally lead with technology, even though technology has been an integral part of how they've built their practice and delivered their projects for the better part of 30 years. In this episode, we explore how a firm keeps the architecture out front and how the technology serves the work. We talk about the office-wide crit that they ran to surface friction points across every role and experience level, the shift that took their visualization team from 3 people to effectively 150, and the honest, messy reality of adoption. What I think makes this conversation special today is the focus on architecture. Technology is the means, never the end, and the reason the firm exists shows up in the projects, not the tool stack. There's a real humility in how they talk about all this, from doing a crit on note cards instead of a Miro board to admitting nobody quite knows where everything is going next. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional links and information in the show notes. Please be sure to check those out. You can find them directly in your podcast app if you are a paid supporter of TRXL Plus. And if you're a free member, you can find them over at the website, which is trxl.co. So, without further ado, I bring you my wide-ranging conversation with Marlene Chen and Blair Payson. Marlene, Blair, welcome to the podcast. Great to have Olson Kundig featured on the podcast. I'm very excited about today's conversation, and so welcome.
Thanks, Evan. I just have to say, this has been the funnest thing to try to get ready for this podcast, so it's a real honor to be here, and just both through many different connections, it's just been really fun to be here, so thank you.
I feel like we had this conversation, we've had it many times already, and I don't mean that literally, but the types of conversations, they evolve, of course, over time. But I think when we had a pre-call a while back, and I showed you, I've been a big fan of the firm. I did find one of my books on my bookshelf. I can't find the other one, and now I've got to find it. And then I showed you, Marlene, my picture with Tom Kundig that I took when I was attending a lecture down in Cal Poly Pomona, which is my alma mater, and that was a really cool thing to be able to sit in and hear him speak. And obviously I've been a big fan of the firm for years. And what's interesting, I was just thinking about this before we hit record, was when I see the work that your firm produces, and I haven't seen all the work that your firm produces, I don't think of technology. I just don't think of it. I think of architecture. So to me, I think the thing that stands out to me is kind of the purity of the pursuit of architecture and the services that you provide to your clients, and obviously tons of beautiful work comes out. But Marlene, what's your reaction to that? Like, I don't think of technology when I think of Olson Kundig's work.
When I think of technology, sometimes I think we tend to think of software and all of that. For sure, those are things that are flowing through our office, but it's really, I think that's what we're really excited to share, is like the way in which people think and approach and kind of manipulate and think about, just use the technology, break it sometimes, is really kind of where some of the magic happens. And ultimately, I go back to the people that come here, the people with the natural curiosity, and then the clients that we get to work for on some of these amazing projects.
Blair, what's your gut reaction?
It's a great observation. I think it's probably true. We don't naturally lead with technology like you may see other firms doing, but I feel like it's a pretty integral part of our practice and has been for a while, sometimes by necessity. I mean, you think about projects in remote places. Really early on, we had to look at how we prefab things, how we do digital models that allow direct fabrication. I mean, some of the remote locations prompted some early going, this going back 30 years now at this point. And then I think, other things are a byproduct of our process that lead to really high technology pieces, like the Space Needle, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. That's the first revolving glass floor in the world. So there are kind of extremes of technological research and development that we get into, but I think you're right in your sense of looking at the work. It's not always the piece that we lead with, but it's often, I would say, a pretty strong component of what we do.
Yeah, what I think of technology as a means to the end, but the end is the reason why you do what you do. And I think a lot of firms are thinking about it the other way around, at least the technologists in those firms who are very forward thinking and pushing and pushing and pushing, because adoption is difficult and we have to be talking about the tools, and we focus on efficiency and productivity and all of these things that, the buzzwords of business. But then when it comes to like, why do firms exist in the first place, or what are their driving values, I think it's apparent in the work that they produce or not. And so it's interesting to kind of just step back and think about that a little bit. So Marlene, how does one prepare to come on this podcast? What kinds of things were running through your mind when you were thinking about coming on?
It spanned all over. Some of it was just actually listening to some of the other episodes that you've done, not only for TRXL, but also for Archispeak. And I was kind of delighted to see, like, you've been doing this since 2012.
Yeah, I know.
That's older than my kid. Oh. So there's
ouch.
It's where, but it, like that we still have that much to talk about just tells you how ever changing this profession is. So for me, a lot of it was, I'll say, meeting with some of the folks in our office. We're just like, what's going on? Where do we want to? What do you think we're doing? And what do you want to hear in terms of for us to share about Olson Kundig, and really kind of appreciating some of the people that that work here, where in terms of our design technology team, our project delivery team, they're all embedded here in terms of helping our project teams. And that's where I started. I started a little internally, and then also doing some research, just listening to the conversations. And one of the ones that I really appreciate is kind of the partnership that you had early on with Chris Parsons at Knowledge Architecture. Mm-hmm. And we've been a customer of their internet for a very long time, and it really goes towards getting that adoption, getting things to change, getting people to think about things, having people share information. That's really at the crux of how we can kind of get stronger as we do more things, do different kinds of things.
Blair, talk about the practice, like just the size of the practice. When Marlene mentions, getting everyone on the same page, what does that mean as far as how many people are we talking about? What kinds of teams? I know from what I originally thought of Olson Kundig, and then maybe the reality of Olson Kundig, you guys do projects all over the world. You do many different market types of projects. It's not just bespoke houses in the middle of Wyoming, in Jackson Hole or something. And so maybe just talk a little bit about that so that there's some context to what that problem set is.
Yeah, no, happy to. I think you're right in the sense that a lot of the time people think we're a much smaller firm than we are because of the often small projects that you see published and that we learn about in remote places like Wyoming, right? But no, we're a hard to define office in that sense. I mean, we really span a huge type of projects, from small cabins in Wyoming to large sports structures to higher ed structures to cultural projects. And I think it's something we often hear is that there's this reaction like, wow, you guys do that? And whoa, you work there? And part of it's thrilling, right? It's really fun to surprise people like, yeah, we've got a big range and interesting mix of work. The kind of short version is that about a quarter of our work historically has been in the Northwest, a quarter in California, a quarter in the rest of the US, and then a quarter international. And that varies, obviously, but that spread is pretty consistent. We have 3 offices. Seattle's the largest. We also have an office in New York and a more recent addition in Chicago. And then a couple outposts with people that have moved and set up more remote working situations elsewhere. We're about just under 300 people. And I think that's often a number that's surprising to people. People think we're smaller. So we're not a big office, but we're certainly sizable enough to work in a variety of project types. And I think it's maybe just to circle back on that, I think that the hard to define piece of that, the sense that we work on small scale residential, large scale residential, commercial work, we really find that those project types and that variety, it really, it's mutually beneficial. We're able to test things on the residential scale that we can then scale up and apply in a commercial project. Likewise, and I think this will carry over to the AI conversation, we can learn things on these much larger scale projects in terms of efficiency or workflows or modeling strategies that then can come back and inform some of our smaller scale work. So it's a pretty rich, dynamic, sometimes chaotic environment, but at its best, it's pretty fantastic, honestly.
Maybe give us an idea of, from a technology implementation standpoint, you mentioned getting everybody on the same page and you mentioned synthesis and knowledge architecture, but I mean, that's still a battle. I think just there's like a consumption version of that, and then there's like a contribution attribute to help getting everybody on the same page, or sharing what you know and doing knowledge transfer in, as you go along day to day in the practice. And I think one of the things Chris says really well is like, experts don't know what they know. It's like what you call me an expert in whatever, some kind of higher ed design. It's like, what does that mean? It's so vague. But then when it comes to delivering a project, that's what I do, right? And so then there's things that are just inherent to the roles that you have, and people don't think of knowledge that they should share through the mechanics of the step by step and the day by day, and yet that stuff is like locked in their brain, and you want to get it out so that you can bring everybody up in the firm. I'm just curious how you guys go. What do you have in place to kind of help do that?
It's an interesting point, because it's exactly where you say, where there's knowledge in people, and we tend to rely on the people as opposed to the system. But that's, I think, how we're humans in that way. So it's, instead of saying, oh, well, it's the hiring group, it's actually, well, is it Brian, right? And those are the instances where we have to sometimes build the system. And if Brian is not here, he's on vacation, what do we do, right? So some of it is, can we capture the knowledge through whether it's an interview, writing down the standard operating procedure, just what are the steps that you're supposed to do? So there's a little bit of that, and that takes time, and people would rather just have a conversation. So we're still kind of massaging that, because at some point you could have 1 million SOPs written, and at that point it becomes noise, right? And so how do we find that information faster, and how can we get people to understand where that information is? So we're kind of steering into knowledge management, but that is definitely something where a firm of our size and with multiple offices and multiple locations, we 100% are wanting people to bring people along, and we often find ourselves realizing, they don't even realize that it's on the intranet. It's been there for the whole time.
I think of the way architects are trained, and we're like just trained to solve problems, and we're just trained to figure it out and make it happen. And if that means reinventing it for this project, so be it. Like that, I've done that many times before. And it's actually, I think, on some levels harder to get someone to look to see if someone else has already solved this so that I can just adopt that. That almost sounds like as much work as just doing it myself. And if you want consistency, that's where what you're talking about like really matters, right? And when you have a brand like Olson Kundig, it seems to me like you need consistency.
I feel like one of the things, this goes back to maybe the previous comment about the range of projects we work on, is that an office of our size, if it was working and focused on large scale projects, there might be 20, big teams. We actually have a lot of teams, and we've had a lot of teams for a while that are really small because of the range of sizes of work that we do. And I think that we've spent a lot of time over the decades developing strategies for knowledge transfer before the consideration of intranet or other strategies around office critiques. We have every Thursday we critique a project. We have a dialogue around that. We present it to one another. We sketch, we draw. We have Monday morning office meetings where we present to one another. We hear speakers. There's a whole set of lunchtime series. I feel like we've tried to figure out workarounds to share knowledge, going back pretty far, just because of the nature of our work and the nature of our teams being small, and the fact that not every team has a super skilled technical architect, because they're spread over a few different areas. So I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about how that carries forward and carries over into our new world here.
When technology is moving so quickly, I mean, this becomes even more pronounced, right? Because it seems like thousands of tools available, and I think firms like yours are probably using in the hundreds of tools kind of a range, right? And there can be a lot of experimentation going on, but there's also a lot of adoption of like the stalwart tools that we use. And so how does that happen at your Thursday sharing, like where it's like, here's some stuff we're looking at, here's what has been working, here's what's not working. Talk about that sharing that you do to kind of get things out in the open.
Yeah, I'll start with that. I would say that there's a variety of ways we talk about it. I would say that the crit projects, the crit conversations, often they're steered more towards specific projects, but AI is a great example of one that, going back a couple of years now, we started to have maybe more philosophical conversations around AI. And it was really the beginning of introducing the topic as a conversation to the office. I think if you look back to when we started experimenting with AI, that goes back probably 3 or 4 years in earnest. But the conversation started pretty soon after that, just about the pitfalls and the considerations and the benefits. And I would say at the crit type of conversation, it's the great spot to hear from everybody, philosophically, if it's the right thing to do, what are the risks, what are the opportunities? And then over time, that starts to transition. So I think over the last year, that started to transition more towards less about maybe, there's still a philosophical, question and aspect to it for sure, but it's steering a little bit more towards almost pulling from the office about, okay, well, what are the things that we want to solve together? And I think it might come back to a larger theme that I feel like as an office that we've really embraced. And it goes back to this whole idea of shared adventure. We talk a lot about how, we don't know what the future is. We're trying to steer and carve a path together here. And how can we do that together? And it goes both ways, right? We really want to understand at various from various quarters of the office, what are the pieces they see as opportunities, what are the risk points, what are the areas to steer clear. Crit's a great venue for that kind of conversation as it gets into the pros and cons and what to look for.
Internally, we have our own kind of internal, we call it OKU, Olson Kundig University, where that's where people share knowledge. So that's a different venue. As Blair was talking about, crit it tends to be more project focused, really kind of project design. How are we going to kind of work through the sketching, things like that. And our other venues really are where we can do some training, knowledge learning as well. But we do kind of reserve that crit for those big things like, for example, AI is just something that is as a wider conversation that we just need to host and really make an effort to include all sides of our business in it, including our business office, and because they're going to gain knowledge and skills by incorporating some of these things. And they also have their own questions and concerns about security, knowledge, things like that. So those venues are really valuable to us in terms of both kind of the OKUs that happen. And those are kind of curated by a committee of people who volunteer their time, and then also the crit crew as well. So they're kind of stewarding that project, those project discussions to sort of keep seeing how our projects can get more eyes on them.
This episode is made possible with support from Part 3. If you're an architect, you already know construction administration is where projects get messy. Documents buried in inboxes, files scattered across drives or GC's software, no clear record of who approved what. It's slow, it's risky, and it's costing your firm time, fees, and trust on every project. Architects deserve better tools for CA, and that's why Part 3 exists. Part 3 is the construction administration platform built for architects, not contractors, not owners, architects. They automate the grunt work behind submittals, RFIs, drawings, and field reports, so your team spends less time clicking and more time designing. It works alongside Procore, Deltek, and Bluebeam, so nothing breaks, but you maintain full control of your data. Submittals get reviewed faster with AI assistance. RFIs get responded to 30% faster. Site reports go out in about an hour, straight from the job site. Over 150 leading architecture firms already trust Part 3 to protect their profit, reduce their risk, and keep construction moving. Take back control of CA. Book a demo at part3.io. That's PART3.io. My thanks to Part 3 for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation. I don't know who the right person to ask about this is, so one of you, you're going to have to arm wrestle on your end. But can you explain how your technology team works in your firm? I mean, just kind of describe your technology team and maybe even a little bit of history about it, because obviously you've been thinking about AI for a few years now, but before that you've been delivering projects all over the place, and it takes technology to do that. And so I'm just curious kind of how your team, how you have it kind of structured or set up throughout your offices and what that looks like.
Maybe this one's a good one for me, Blair, to talk a little bit about. I think historically, we've usually had a kind of a principal in charge who's kind of overseen a little bit of the technology side, and that leaned a lot towards IT. But as there became more tools around in terms of our design generation and our design production, we kind of needed to start bringing in a lot of those people who had different titles, right? The VDC manager, the BIM manager, the BIM specialist, things like that. And by the time we got to, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, we were like, this is a thing, design technology as a group, and as a group that is understanding kind of what's out there and bringing that back and understanding how these processes work. The main thing is, what's really fascinating is that there's also these like super users within the office who are well embedded on projects, but naturally curious to understand what if I tried this, and they're just in conversation with that design technology team. So from there, they're obviously well embedded with IT, which is helping the secure side, rolling out a lot of the software and working in concert together. So the DT team works, several of them work embedded on projects, really kind of making sure those complicated ones, working with consultants and making sure all that information flows well and that the model health is good. But it is one where we're evolving kind of how that structure works a little bit. And I'd say I've gotten a part of my preparation for this was a lot more deep dive in with our technology to understand where we have opportunities, and especially as AI is brewing and just changing at this blistering pace, it is one where between that, our visualization team, they're leading a lot of the way as well, because we're seeing a lot of gains and just innovation there. And probably one of the things that we most hear is addressing some of the pain points that just felt like churning and not a productive use of time. So those are things that we were really seeing in terms of how our technology is working. Blair, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, maybe the thing I was thinking about in part of that question too is maybe how technology works its way in and gets adopted, and it evolves. I think we've reorganized our approach to AI like 3 or 4 times now, as we transition from maybe this more play experimental to integration and adoption. And I think looking back at, when we first got 3D printers and our laser cutter, and when Inkscape, I'm just like thinking back to these different thresholds, Revit. The safe spot for us is to often start with play, and we often will start with a competition or a way to kind of prompt the office to just experiment with the tools and play. And sometimes these internal ideas competitions are the easiest place to start. For the 3D printer, I remember we all designed different keg handles for our keg in the office. Things like that are often places that we start. And then I think as that play starts to just pick up a bit of momentum, sometimes organically the structure of the team evolves to support that. And I think AI has been a good example of that. We've slowly augmented over time and added more structure to the point now that there's increasing rigor around an approach on that front.
That's a really good point, Blair. The internal competitions I just love. And I just wanted to share, I loved the fact that one of our in-house attorneys competed in that and made something. And it was that's kind of the cleverness, try. And that's just a great reminder of that process.
I was going to ask if you do those for all different kinds of technologies then. So it sounds like, that 3D printer is one example, but have you done those for others as well?
Yeah, I think that we've, and it's varied, but I definitely know that we've done Rhino competitions. We've done themed competitions. We've also done this was a crit actually that was pretty fun, where we actually had a whole bunch of computers set up and really just invited people to do the wildest images that they could, create. And it was almost comical because some of these tools are so early going. It's just a joke. You can't do half of what you want to do, and what you do create is just ridiculous. And part of the fun was seeing each other experiment and kind of bump up to that with others around. So I think part of it is just smiling and just sort of accepting, like, wow, this is an adventure we're on together. Let's see how we just wade in. But I would say it's a pretty common starting point for a lot of our pieces.
Evan, one of the areas that I wanted to say is, like, is it always technology? I don't know. Like, we had a competition because we needed a lectern.
Yeah.
We have a open speaking area, and it's like a stand, and it like cords are hanging everywhere, and we're like, what would we do if Olson Kundig designed a lectern? So we had a little design competition. Have we built it yet? No, but I think we know exactly what we want to do, and it just gets the juices flowing. And what we're really kind of talking about is, like, what's the thing that's kind of driving us nuts? Like, this should be better. And that's that attitude of kind of, it goes into projects a lot. Like, well, I get that that's what the manufacturer detail says, but what if we looked at it just this way? What if could we ask that question? And very often the question is like, yeah, I don't see why we couldn't do that. And all of a sudden, that's where you're kind of getting a little bit of, like, pushing that curiosity of, like, could we ask? Like, what's the harm in asking? And so really those moments of, like, what if, couldn't we? What do you think? Like, that questioning is both kind of underlying in the crit, and then also getting to this thing in the corner is really bothering me. We should be able to design a better solution.
The thing in the corner that's really bothering me is the thing that everybody notices to the point that they just don't notice it anymore. And I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because I think that is a lot of the process of architecture. It's just like, and now we wait 45 minutes for the file to open, and now we wait another 45 minutes for it to print. And it's like there's these things that we just accept as normal, but they weren't normal when they really bothered us, and then we just got kind of used to them. I feel like now more than ever, technology's coming after these problems, but we have to step back and identify what those things are, like the lectern example of, like, wow, this is just a total mess. We of all people should do something about this, because everybody just lived with it though, right? They just said, okay, yeah, who's got time for that? We're not going to. And then all of a sudden you actually made space for that to happen. It sounds like you're pretty intentional about making space to at least put the potential out there to say, hey, there's these tools that do these kinds of things, and they're doing a lot of things that we're probably not even thinking about, to your point earlier, Marlene, about getting the different groups, the business groups within the business, like HR and marketing, involved in, like, the AI kind of stuff, I would imagine, because it's language models. They can help all kinds of people, and it's not just designers who are going to use those tools. It's IT is going to use those tools, support's going to use HR. It seems like there's potential for everybody to use those. So it sounds really cool that you're intentionally just carving out space to look at the things that everybody's just oh yeah, we can make an excuse to look at something.
Yes, this is a great kind of segue, Blair. I think if we talked a little bit about the crit that we held, that was both hilarious and eye-opening, the things that we heard, and like, oh no, we shouldn't be spending time on that. We can help, right? And taking a moment to just hear those pain points was a really, and it was fascinating, because our team that we're working with, we're very intentional to say, please don't say that this is a crit about AI. This is not about that. AI might be able to help us, but can we talk about what is the thing that what is that pain point that we're experiencing? Because you might be able to help us build something that will help somebody over on the other side or in another office who's having the same problem, understanding the scale of what that problem is. 20 people are waiting 45 minutes to print something. Like, that's not what we want. That's where we need to kind of tackle, because then it has some impact. Blair, do you want to talk a little bit about that crit?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to the crit. I also, gosh, Evan, just you pointing out, like, looking for the squeaky wheel or the thing in the corner that you want to fix. Just this week, Greg Rogers, our director of visualization, came to our office, or came to our leadership meeting, and wanted to give an update on visuals. And I think he's the great example of somebody that does that. And he specifically said, like, there's this microwave on the 5th floor. It drives me crazy. It moves every time you open the door, and he fixes it. Like, he's the one that goes to get the tile sample from the sample library and wedges it back there so it doesn't do it anymore. And he actually gave that as an example of like, that's the kind of person he is. And he applies that, right, to his field or his area of focus, which is totally changing. And I think he was one of the first ones that, I mean, this is 6-7 months ago, maybe when it was Nano Banana 2 was coming out. And it was like, he said, hey, principals, owners, we have to talk now. Like, my job is gone. Like, it's changing, and we need to rethink about how we look at both my role, my focus, and what I can do to adjust things as how we work as an office and how I work as an individual from Greg's perspective. So I think I guess I'd say that we really try to be open-minded and listen for and make space for individuals with that proclivity and courage to stand up, to come forward. And
I was going to say that exact
right?
thing. It's like, that is a very courageous move, to just put your neck out there and say, look, like, let's get in front of this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would choose to kind of hide and not even address this as an issue. So, I mean, that speaks a lot to his character, but I would assume that's pretty rare too.
I think it gets harder as offices get bigger, and you don't know everyone quite as well as individuals. We try to be as warm and welcoming as we can, but I think it's just, if you're a new grad and a new employee, it takes a while to get to the comfort level of who we all are as people. I do think that crit sometimes, to go back to Marlene's comment, is sometimes a way in. And one of the things we experimented with the crit conversation around identifying friction points and opportunities of things to adjust is that we divided the groups into, I would say, experience levels or roles or titles in the office. And it was so interesting because the project managers, their list of friction points is completely different than the interns or the entry-level architects or the more technically minded project leaders. And I think it was just so great when we kind of shared out to one another. The range was extraordinary. It was so different. And again, it takes courage to stand up and share in front of, at that point, probably, I don't know, 85 or 90 people. But we've tried to build it in and kind of support each other to stand up and share what you have heard and what you've kind of summarized as that group's conversation. And it was pretty interesting. I think in the safe space of your immediate kind of same level of colleagues, what you come up with is just so different when you don't have maybe the owner in the room. So
that's definitely one of the moments of having the space to discuss it and then to articulate it. And I think this, in terms of where we found that varying, was also an ability to sympathize with another person who doesn't necessarily do the same thing that you do. And talking to some of the principals and people who are out there doing a lot of business development and meeting clients, like, for them, it's like the how do we become far more prepared for these, to have this information just at our fingertips. Whereas the entry-level architect was like, I just don't want to spend so much time looking for stuff, right? Like, I wish it was easier to find, that there was some consistency. And those who are kind of deep in their production years, where they're just learning how to kind of put together drawing sets, contributing to those in construction, they're like, we would love to have kind of the firm knowledge somewhere to capture. So as you hear all of those different levels, and then your manager's like, meeting notes, scheduling, all these kind of things, where they all have, when you just hear the different pain points at different levels, was, I'd say, eye-opening for many. And also, I'd say, gives you greater sympathy for what people are kind of experiencing and going through. And also gave us a lot of clear examples of either A, we need to teach people because these things exist today, or B, this is something we can work on and fix. And so that's where that was a energizing one, and we're building a lot off of that too. To your point, Evan, earlier, of like, do we know what's the thing in the corner that we have to go fix? So as we parse through that.
So how do you actually start to work on that? Because I bet you generated a giant list, right? And it's like, because everybody's got multiple, let's just say, everybody who showed up, and then there's the people who didn't show up, and they've got them too. And of course, there's going to be some overlap in there, but you still have a lot of stuff to potentially address. How do you start to whittle that down and attack that when you still have project deadlines and RFP deadlines and, you know, all the things that a modern architecture office has to deal with from like actually doing your job? Obviously, these things contribute to you being able to do your job better, maybe. So it seems like a lot of them are probably worth addressing, but then actually tackling that is a whole other thing.
I could start, and then Marlene, I think you'll have definitely a piece to add here. I think the interesting thing is that a big portion of the list that we generated was actually solvable by just sharing. Oh, actually, you know, that's a specific part of a tool we use, or this is a thing we've already figured out. But so that was actually kind of almost a silver lining piece from the
So do you address those right then in real time? Is that the kind
Not
of,
right
or you
then.
say, hey, let's get together after this and I'll show you how to do that?
You know, if we were fast enough, we would have done more of it right then. But really, this was just compiling. And I think now it's clear, we can go back and say like, hey, as an office, you know, this was, these are the top 3 things that we have solutions for. And I think it probably is going to inform a little bit of the training that we already have structure for with the OKU that Marlene spoke about. And then there's the whole other body of things like, actually, there's some real opportunities there. And I think you're right. That part's trickier because you could easily spend all your time, you know, solving these pieces and not do any of your project work, right? So I think we're just in the thick of actually trying to prioritize, okay, this would have the biggest impact on the most number of people, and actually can be a little bit of an addition or a little bit of a tweak of things we already have, versus, okay, this is a little bit more blue sky. Let's either set that aside or keep it going, but in parallel to maybe pieces that we can check off a little bit more easily. But I think you're kind of putting the kind of your finger on the thing that we're right in the thick of, is like, wow, actually there's a lot of things that people want to be doing better and more efficiently and differently. And how do we do that now? That's what we're in. Marlene, what would you add to that?
Not much. All I know is that when we kind of suggested this is how we're going to do the crit, there was a lot of feedback like, be careful what you wish for. You're going to get and we have a lot kind of on our plates to kind of tackle. And it's exciting because honestly, there's an opportunity now that doesn't feel like it was there before. And whether it's AI or technology that will help us there, underlying, I think, is that there's a great opportunity, I think, to make a lot of things, a lot of nitpicky things, like just the things that it doesn't feel like it's a good use of our time, and for our teams to be kind of that whole idea of like, how do we optimize kind of what it is that we spend our time on? That's really where we're looking, and so I'm excited about that. We're like, you caught us right at the point where we're kind of synthesizing it. We did it old school. We're like, note cards. Like, it wasn't a Miro board. It was like note cards. So we have a whole stack of note cards and, you know, working through that.
I had an experience where I would go around from office to office and talk with teams about technologies that we were rolling out, thinking about rolling out, you know, beginning to address the issues of, and it would surface things like what you're talking about. And I think what it would surface that was most alarming was people who had had issues for years and just decided to go rogue because no one was addressing them. Like, they were like, I have brought this up umpteen times and no one's ever done anything about it. So I solved it myself, and I've got a folder on my desktop and it does this, and it's my secret treasure, and you can pry it out of my cold dead fingers now because there's a little bit of bitterness there now too. It's like, and so, I mean, I'm just curious from your standpoint, like the bigger you get, the harder it gets, right? Because people aren't always heard and seen because it's a giant ship that's moving really fast and there's lots of moving parts, and, you know, there's all of that. And I'm not looking for answers here, but it's just one of the things that I think a lot of firms are dealing with. And it's an incredibly difficult part of the business because there are so many people who are really capable of solving something for themselves, but then it stays at that level, and then you get a lot of fracturing because it doesn't work with the new system that the DT team comes along with that wants to bring some semblance of consistency across the firm with. And you guys, I'm sure you're both nodding your heads.
Yes.
You've seen things like this.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's even, in our office again, we've just got such a variety of small teams that it's almost probably even more extreme in an office like ours than it might be in other offices. And I think the lesson that I've learned over the years is that the new tools or templates will get used when they're easy enough and they save time, over what you've maybe saved on your desktop. And I feel like we've turned the corner in a few of those fronts in terms of things like project proposal approaches or contracts. I think we've finally gotten the templates and the kind of path is so much easier to follow the rules, so to speak, that I feel like there's a little less maybe rogue behavior, but it's a whole other can of worms when you start talking about the way to detail a building or to set up your drawing sheets. We have long conversations. I mean, if the project delivery group was on here, they would share how long it took to finally agree on the one or sometimes two sheet sizes that we're going to use. And that's just the sheet size. And that's a whole other conversation, but
not even the title block, man.
No, that's next step. Yeah.
That's a 3-year process right there. So let's talk about the kinds of things that your technology team is doing right now, what you're focused on, what you're excited about. I know, Blair, you gave a talk at UW, right, where you and some other local firms. I'm curious the topics that you're talking about in your circles.
I think it's just an interesting moment where I feel like, and I'm not a technologist. I mean, I'm a practitioner, and I have kind of grown into this role shepherding our conversation because of a proclivity to want to tinker and research and figure things out and do things a little bit differently. So I feel like I've organically grown into this role. The thing that I've love about this moment, it just feels like when you look back, and you'll be much more knowledgeable at this than I am, but it just feels like there are these surges that are every few months. There's just this giant leap forward in terms of what the technology can do or what the potential is. And it feels like we're in another one of those moments now. And when I think about the things that I'm excited about here, for example, we are, Greg, I mentioned him earlier, has developed really an aggregator for some of the graphic tools that we both have in-house and that you can have access to in terms of new tools. And it feels like it's just one of these moments where, gosh, Greg is an example of somebody who reinvented his role from being steward of a relatively small team coaching others to basically helping provide a tool that aggregates all these other tools that the entire office is able to elevate their graphic approach. And it makes me excited because what I've learned at our office is that there's a portion of the office that just can't help themselves but just keep pushing and breaking and changing and manipulating what we have access to do something different and better. And I just feel like it's a huge leap forward in that front, in the sense that the whole office is lifted up here. But it's also a higher platform that these, the kind of mad scientists, break it, do something different style people can take it even further, right? And show the path, at least on that front, of other ways to do things. So I would say on the design side, it's just the world's it's really expanding on that front in terms of how we approach and do visuals and study pieces. And then Marlene, you should layer on some of the other operational side of things, but it's pretty much a full front of effort at the moment. So
this episode of the TRXL podcast is supported by Avail, and I wanted to share a piece of a conversation I recently had with one of Avail's customers. Check it out. What was the moment or the project that finally made your firm say, we actually need to manage this stuff? Do you remember?
I was there. We actually came from another platform. And so it was a platform that we felt like wasn't sort of really invested in the customer and wasn't really sort of understanding the customer's problems. They sort of had a much harder to navigate user interface. It made it harder to sort of upload and harvest these projects in the method that we wanted. And so we looked at a bunch of different products when we were abandoning that previous platform. We met Randall and his team, and we felt that these guys understand us. And so we went with their platform a number of years ago, and the community and the support that they've provided has kept us, lockstep with their advancements and development. And we just got a preview, I think, last month on some of the stuff that they're going to release this year, and couldn't be more excited. It's always something that I knew I wanted but couldn't quite articulate, and Randall always is able to do that for us. So this next roadmap is super exciting.
My thanks to Avail for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation.
I think your question was about what's the technology team, and so there's both sides to it, right? There's our kind of the IT side, and then there's also the DT side. But one of the areas that I think, just to go back to the design side, is one of their key points is they teach people, right? And they have to listen to the people who are having those pain points. They're kind of bringing those things forward and like, how can we make things better? They're also kind of at the forefront of just like natural curiosity, right? I think you've met Gavin Argo, and he's a design technology strategist here at Olson Kundig, and he's fishing in everything. And so what I've always appreciated is how people like him are able to connect with individuals and teach. And that's a huge portion, I think, of what they're also doing, is like, how do you make everyone else stronger and better so that, in some ways they become their own masters. And one of the things I think that the example that Blair gave about what our visualization director did was even the way that he expressed it. I went from a team of 3, he has 2 visualization artists, to a team of like 150, right? Everybody is able to now get better at this. And that is really one where that technology team, I think, really kind of teaching, curating kind of what we do. We've taken a look at that piece of software. We kind of don't really think it's going to work for us because people are naturally curious here. So they're kind of the recipients of like, well, have you ever looked at this software? Have you looked at this software? So the celebrating, I think, is another really important part. And Blair and I have really talked about like, how do we make sure that it doesn't die in one person's corner of the office where like that moment of like, this was better, someone else could actually make it better. I think that's something that we're trying to unlock and invest in. But in terms of like a day-to-day thing, a lot of it is, I think, where you highlighted before, Evan, which was change management. Like, we're going to have to go through a pretty painful upgrade of Revit, and this is how you have to do it, everybody. And so that just hand-holding and guiding of project teams and being there as a backstop and being there as a cheerleader is something else, as well as there's a lot of AI tool research that they're doing kind of with the project delivery team. And then they're also deeply embedded in projects. And then a lot of it, I think, where we're really trying to get to is kind of really at the beginning part of the project setup, which is, can we help get in front of teams to coach them to understand what they need to be doing and what they don't need to be doing at certain phases? Because we do have a tendency to kind of just go all, to put a lot into that model. And is that the best use of what we need to be doing per the contract, per our deliverables, per the phase that we're in? So they're advising as well. So they're a real resource for the office.
There's many different ways we could go with the things that are running through my brain. One of the things I wanted to bring up was this idea of your team of 3 visualization artists going to a team of 150. And I think there's fear in that kind of a scenario for a lot of people. Not for everyone, obviously, but for a lot of people, it's like, this is my turf. And there's a big fear of that democratization of tools to get to a point where, oh, now anybody can do it. And I'm curious how that team of 3, like, how are they stewarding that shift that sounds like it already kind of happened? I mean, obviously tools helped make that happen. You even mentioned Enscape earlier, Blair. Like, that was kind of one of the steps along this evolution, right? It went from like pristine renderings that are, you have to be highly technician of V-Ray or whatever in 3D Studio Max to get this level. And then, okay, good enough was convenient enough with a tool like Enscape. And now you're talking about even further I don't want to say diluting, right? But you're distributing that ability to more people because of the democratization and the power of the tools and making the interface approachable by so many people. What's the mindset going on there? Because on one level, you're saying, well, let's take off the stuff that they don't need to be doing and let them focus on even higher end experiential. I don't know what the words are, right? But there's a lot of directions you could go with that. And then there's also that fear of like what your lead said is like, look, like it's gone. I don't need to be doing this anymore. So, I mean, that transition is happening really intensely right now.
I think for us, it's almost out of necessity. I think when you think about a team, if it's just, one or two people, they really need the access to, for example, just on the theme of visuals, they need access to visuals just as much as a team of 15 people. And a team of 15 people, they might have a great visual artist baked into the group, but that team of one or two, occasionally a team's going to have somebody that's really got great proclivity with graphics, but not always, because you just don't have the ability to have that range of skills on every team. And so the great thing for us is that I think it does enable really every team to tell a more compelling story. And I think that's maybe a theme that we come back to a lot in the office, is that so much of the way that we approach projects, sometimes it's explicit narrative and storytelling, sometimes it's more implied, but it's really so integral to how you experience a built project and how we share concepts to client. And visuals are a huge part of that, right? And now video, I mean, we're layering on video, like things that used to be a 50 slide pitch deck are now a video, like not a sizzle reel, but kind of a video describing the project. And I think maybe the theme there is that I think it's just letting us tell a story that's more compelling and a better reflection of what we're trying to convey. In a sense, in an office that maybe that was a harder skill set to have on every team. And so for us, I think it's really elevating all the projects to have that ability in a way that just wasn't possible before.
It seems to me like that's the right attitude, and that like this idea that you just expressed about the work and like the importance of like pushing the work and really having the mindset of like, it's not about me, it's about the work and it's about the project is something that's important, I think, for like just what's the North Star here? What are the values, and kind of coming back to that, and that the roles are in service to that. It's not the other way around. It's not like the things that we're doing are it's not personal. It's about doing this bigger thing, and that's why we actually all work together, is so that we can accomplish this bigger thing that no one of us could accomplish on our own.
It goes back to what Blair was saying earlier, which is really that shared adventure together. Whether it's a shared adventure with the client, sometimes they need guidance as well, and just the same way that a team does. But I think that there's a lot of feeling like we can do this. Let's go. Let's roll up our sleeves and get going on kind of building something, right? Whether it's building a new tool within our business office or a new process that allows us to, answer RFPs in a different way. That's where really, I think there's a lot of hunger, because to your point, I think there are people that are maybe seeing the light of not being like, maybe it doesn't need to be like this. And I don't have to actually, whatever that annoying thing that was happening every time I started up my computer, it doesn't have to be that way. So that does kind of flow through a lot of the office in terms of in terms of that. But your point about that nervousness or that gatekeeping or that feeling of like, but that was my thing. I think we're trying to have more conversations. Where I mean, wouldn't you say that there's the idea of talking about it more may make it more normalized, that it might change, but you have so much to bring in terms of your knowledge, right? Don't hold on to it. There's so much benefit if you can imagine the next person who can do what you do, and then all of a sudden they're helping somebody else. So I look at it that way, where it's more of a force multiplier as opposed to like, it's going to take what I do because you might do something amazing, different. I don't know. That's maybe the optimism that I have about the whole thing.
I think there's also a challenge kind of embedded in that, which is like, well, if we were to take this low level stuff off your plate, what's the challenge for you now that you're going to kind of have to intrinsically motivate? Like, we can't, I think that's what's so interesting about technology these days is like it reminds me of like when Apple introduced the iPad, right? It was like Steve Jobs on stage and he's like, I'm not sure what you're going to do with this. Like we have our ideas. It's a magazine. It's the New York Times. It's like digital, media consumption device. But we think the developers and the customers are actually going to have really interesting ideas that we're not even thinking about. I think technology is kind of like that today, where it's like, well, the tools are there, and now it's really up to your imagination. And it's never been easier for people to kind of, vibe coding's a thing. It's a legit thing right now. It's just like scratch your own itch, see what you can do. And do you guys, okay, so you've created space for people to experiment. How explicit are you about that? Because I think firms are kind of struggling with that concept of like, well, of course there's deadlines and stuff, and a lot of these super users that you even described earlier got that way by doing it on nights and weekends, right? Like they had this passion. There's not time at work because of deadlines, but I'm just curious, do you guys give people space and time and incentives even to, I'm going to use the big podcasting air quotes, innovate, right? There's no guarantees that anybody's going to come up with anything good, but through the failures, we learn, and we learn better ways, and we think we find new ways to do things. Are you explicit about doing that?
I mean, I think we're probably not super explicit, but we definitely celebrate moments when there's like, wow, look at this. Look what this team pulled together or did differently with tools we have access to. So I feel like it's celebrated in a way that I hope is perceived as motivating others to experiment with things that we have access to. But sometimes that lack of specificity comes back to bite us. I mean, I think the great example for us is we showed this really compelling video that was part of a project proposal. It was so good, and the architecture was kind of an element in it, but it was much more about the context, and you could see people, and you saw the sense of the landscape. It was much more about the atmosphere of a project than the architecture itself. And it was just this like eye-opening, oh my gosh, this is the way to tell the story about what a place should feel like with visuals and not just words. And you can do these videos now in a way that just wasn't possible. Well, the next day or the next week, suddenly everyone that had, their office credit card went out and charged their Weavy, got their Weavy license and tokens, and we had an kind of foreseen suddenly surge in some of the office expenses. And so we've learned a few lessons about like, okay, every once in a while we share an example, but we've got to give some brackets and some framework about how to steer it at least.
Some bumpers a little bit, maybe. Well, I mean, then there's other examples of I don't know if this is happening in architecture, but it's definitely happening kind of in the technology world, which is show me how you're using your tokens, and you have to hit these thresholds because they want people to be getting comfortable, and they want people to be pushing the boundaries of their experimentation and the things that they're doing. And like that's another end of the spectrum, which is like go, and incentivize, saying, here's your budget, go for it. And that really hasn't been a thing in architecture before. It's like, here's your tools, work within these boundaries. And now we're talking about, okay, there's no boundaries, but your new boundary is, okay, a token limit or a certain dollar amount per day or per week or whatever it is. Wow. Different way of looking at it.
I think we're not, to be honest, I'd say that we're in the early stages of that as we navigate more of this, because it doesn't feel like tech, the way that tech is feeling, where there's incentives to use more tokens and prove that you're doing this. Because I would say that we're a bit more applied. Like, what is it actually yielding? What are we actually solving for? And that's a question that I think we have to always, to your point of like, what do we start first? What's the problem that we're solving for? Then I think we can figure out whether or not it's a new tool we need to build.
For sure.
Something, all of that is. But you ask a very good question, and it's certainly something I think Blair and I have discussed a lot, which is like, as leaders, how do we evolve the business, right? In terms of making sure that there is space for this. And again, it's not a requirement, but I think if there's anything that can be done to help, improve whatever the nagging little bit is. And pretty soon, like at some point, I'd love it to hear that the nagging little bit has that list has gotten smaller, but there's gonna be new things. But I do think that where technology is going is it's going to start eating bigger fish, right? Like it's just going to be more complex things that it's starting to address. And
Yeah.
that's one where honestly I don't think even our technologists know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't agree with the methodology of you have to burn through these tokens and that proves something. But I do think that the technology isn't going to be the thing that, I mean, on some level it unlocks, but it's really the people using the technology that unlock the thing. And if your people aren't using the technology, they can't unlock the thing, right? And so it's nuanced, but it's also this is where things are going in many regards, right? It's not, I'm not just talking about visualization. I'm not just talking about using whatever tools for whatever thing, but it's just a mentality of being current. And I'm not even talking about being cutting edge, right? Because I actually, where a little bit of this is coming from is I had a conversation off the record with somebody who was saying, our firm just doesn't do this stuff at all. And therefore, I am left to do this on my own nights and weekends. And then that is, some of that value is going to trickle back to the firm, but not to its potential. And part of that is also they're going to outgrow their role because they're not allowed to do it for their role. And I'm just, is any of that kind of stuff kind of hitting home for you guys? Is that the things that your leadership teams are talking about when it comes to, I mean, it's got to be harder than ever right now to keep up even with the multiple fire hoses of things that are being sprayed at us at all moments, technology-wise. And at the same time, you can't not be addressing it, right? So, and I know you guys are addressing it on many levels, just speaking with Gavin, right? So what does that spur in you?
For me, I'd say that's probably where me on the operations side, I try to navigate where how we're gonna wrap our arms around this. So I mean, it really is, discussing, can we create a sandbox, right? Is there a place where people know that they can go? Where, I mean, I think a lot of people are actually very hungry to engage with some of these new tools, but they're just worried that they're not doing it right. And so that's where we have to kind of guide them a little bit and ensure that, yes, in here, you're fine, right? Versus go sign up for your own account and it's on your work computer and it gets, that's where I think our IT department gets
for sure
more testy.
Legitimately. Yeah.
And I think that's where we want to make sure that our project teams are very cognizant of when we need to be protective of information. And that's where I think we want to, that's the work that we're undertaking right now. Because that's, that all falls under the governance category.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think also kind of falls into a larger philosophy around our maybe what you call experimentation or research. We've never had an R&D department. And I've always loved, Tom's approach on this is it's all applied research. And I think the range of our work supports this in the sense that we have some small projects that you can do experiments with that maybe you only need to convince the owner, in this case, one or two people instead of a board, to do something interesting and different. And so I think you see that in a lot of our work where some of our most experimental pieces, kinetics, for example, would show up maybe in a small project first and then eventually scale up to be on larger commercial facing work. And I think the same thing could be said for technology in the sense that we certainly have teams and a team that's focused on vetting tools and testing different approaches. But as quickly as we can, we try to apply that to a workflow. And sometimes it doesn't always work, right? And sometimes there's some unintended detours. But for the most part, we learn the most when we can get that pretty quickly into a project team's approach, either what is being built or the tools that are being used to design. And I think that's starting to play out now with, this whole new battery of tools.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company Avail, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. You said the word kinetics, and I would love for you to define that for the audience, because that's an Olson Kundig thing, right? Yeah. And I'm going to pull out my book again for the people watching along. I think this is an example of what you're talking about on the back of the book, mm-hmm. right? Which is kind of these operable machines that are they make their way into your projects to do cool things at many different scales, right? But could you define kinetics and talk about that? Because I would actually like to get the conversation towards the end here, maybe back towards design, and talk about a couple of projects that are the output of kind of this process and these workflows and the complicated job that it is to run a practice of architecture nowadays that we've been kind of exploring different avenues within. But talk about kinetics.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of listening for opportunities. And where that started was Tom had a client in Idaho that, probably as an offhand comment, said, gosh, it'd be great just to not have the glass between me and this amazing view looking out across the lake. And it's the value of in-person or conversations with the client, in the sense you listen for those moments. And Tom, to his credit, right, was like, wow, actually, maybe we could make that happen. And basically led to the kinetic wall that we refer to the project as Chicken Point, but a really large window wall that literally flips up that can be opened. There's a great video, it's on our website, of a little girl in a cast literally opening it. It's that easy. And I think it was immediately compelling in the sense that it made architecture just more dynamic, accessible. It allowed flexibility. It brought this connection to the exterior, which is something we really celebrate, certainly in the Northwest. And started this kind of body of work that's played out on a number of projects. Now I think kinetics is a great example of when we never start a project saying like, oh, okay, where's the opportunity to integrate kinetics into this? Right. But we listen for those chances. And sometimes it's the right thing to layer in, among others, right?
The mentality of the curiosity of, I wonder if, or what if we did this? That is something where 100% that kind of bleeds itself through almost all project teams, which is, what if we looked at it this way? Because that I don't know, the other thing, Blair, that it often does is it just brings that sense of joy, right? Like, there's a moment of delight. The outside comes inside, right? And they're not always necessarily exterior to interior. They're often sort of interior, but what is it achieving? And then how is it, that's where that partnership with our gizmologist, or we call him a gizmologist, but it's Phil Turner. Phil Turner is just, he's the brain science behind it, but it is such a collaborative relationship where he's looking at it saying, well, here's the forces that are doing this. And the team is looking at it and saying, here's the proportions that we'd like to see. Here's the motion. Here's what it's trying to achieve. And that collaboration really kind of creates that magic. But it all stems from just like, well, what happens? And it's the other influences. I think, Blair, the one with our skylight in our office, I don't know if you ever, that one is also on our website, where that came from watching somebody lifting a boat with a hose, right? So it's just, it's water pressure, right? And so that curiosity is what people in this office bring back to work, and then say, well, I saw this. What if you did this? And that's where that kinetic elements are. I love the fact that it's a tool that we have that we're facile with, but it's not necessarily what's led, because you're really just looking what the opportunity is in terms of what you want to solve for that particular project.
I would imagine some clients come to you and they're like, I can't wait to see what gizmo you designed for this project, because they actually want it. Like they're also looking for that opportunity. Like the I think it's on one of the islands in Washington. There's the bathroom where the whole roof opens up, right? It's like, oh, I would have never thought of that, but I can go soak in the bathtub and I can look at the stars at the same time, and I'm in my space, but the roof pops open. There's many examples in the way that this is expressed in the work. I bet there's some clients who are just like, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.
It for sure happens. And I think that it's not something we typically lead with. I mean, if it's something, architecture is on some level a service business. So if something comes with that, we certainly listen and collaborate and figure out what the right piece is. But they are pretty extraordinary as a way just to change your experience of a place. And I think the thing with kinetics, and that is really an aspect of a lot of our work, is just that it's not expected, and it just changes what your feeling of a space or a building can be. And that's an emotion we're going for on every project, right? Like, what's the view that's going to be framed differently, even if it's not a big window wall that opens, but you turn a corner and you see something in a way that you just never did before. What causes you to pause and see the world differently? That's a kind of core piece that you see on all the works you experience if you're able to see them in person.
It adds another dimension, for sure. I mean, it sets it apart. So, yeah, really fun. So what are some other maybe highlight projects, one or two, that you guys are really proud of? You mentioned the Space Needle earlier. That, I mean, obviously a iconic remodel of really, really interesting project. Are there that one or others? What are you thinking?
I can maybe add a little bit to that project just because it's such an interesting moment specific to AI. When we started the Space Needle renovation, a lot of where we started was research and looking back at some of the original sketches and what the original designer intentions were. And the audacity of the thinking was just wild. I mean, it was before the Space Needle, as you kind of imagine it, emerged. They were looking at balloons that were tethered to the ground with funiculars. I mean, it was just the far out thinking. We've been working on World Fair, World Fair imagery. We've been working on the project now for years with the renovation, and now we're actually replacing the elevators for double stack, fully glazed elevators. They're pretty spectacular if you're in Seattle to visit. But the reason I circle back to the Space Needle is that we were lucky enough, Alan Maskin, who was the design lead for the project, and I was the project architect, we're lucky enough to join a University of Washington crit that's focused, or a studio rather, that's focused on the Space Needle. And their explicit ask by the professor is to use AI tools to develop their project. And it's a totally new world certainly for many of us, but certainly students that are wading into design for, earliest years here. And the thing that's so fun for Alan and I and the studio crits is that they're trying to develop videos that are super powerful in terms of telling the story they're trying to get across. And then B, the imagery is so interesting and almost, in some cases, almost otherworldly. It almost is full circle back to the kind of big thinking of the 60s. And I just think it's such an interesting moment where, some of the tools that we have access to now maybe liberated us in a way that we were thinking, decades ago in some cases, but can just do a little bit differently now.
Marlene, any getting back to this idea of why you do what you do, why Olson Kundig exists, and beyond the means to get there. These are really the kinds of things I think that it sounds like what you're talking about. And are there projects to you that really stand out that there's a certain sense of pride to, that you guys were able to deliver to clients that just,
for sure,
not only blew their minds, but blew the internal minds of Olson Kundig as well?
Yeah, for sure. One of the ones that Blair, that I was thinking about was Moonlight Basin that just opened in Montana. Oh, yeah. That is a huge undertaking. It's a large-scale hospitality project between lodge, spa, branded residence, and in a corner of the country that we're well versed in. But that, and then kind of more recently, a project that Tom and Kevin Kudo King launched, which is a project in Austin, I think it's Aman Sanu or
Lano.
Yes, Lano is, but I think that there's a new name for it. But either way, that work continues to build off of, I think, what we're talking about, that we've built a legacy of 60 years of that single family residential work that started with Jim Olson, right? I think, and he continues to practice today, and it kind of inspires, a large group of people here at the office. But those two projects in terms of our hospitality work is exciting. I mean, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of like expert knowledge that we, there's certainly some lessons within there. But what we're seeing in terms of how we're telling those narratives and those stories, those are using a lot of the technology tools. Those are some of the project teams that are really leaning hard into them and seeing really, really wonderful results there. And I'm just trying to think of there's work that we're doing also we're excited in New York City, right? Like there's projects that when we were only located in Seattle, like the work, I'd say that some of the repositions that Kirsten is leading, just kind of bringing new life to buildings in New York City are kind of exciting. So, I mean, Blair, you've got some other interesting pursuits, but I'm trying to think of our residential work continues to just be a wealth of inspiration for what we bring out into other areas. But we have several small museums kind of in the Rockies, in Plains and things like that. So those are led, I think, by Kirsten right now as well.
What is it about the Moonlight Basin project that really makes it stand out to you?
Oh, oftentimes it's the first of a project of this scale. Really required a lot of coordination. I think it was probably, God, how long has that project been in the office, Blair?
It's been years and years and years. I mean, I think some of our earliest forays into branded residences, which is a whole other theme of designs that people can really almost buy into without putting the years into designing a custom home. Mm-hmm. It's also, I think, our first ski lift that we've designed. It's a whole host of first and a scale of project that I think was probably some of our earliest leaning in on a scale of project that really transcends what was maybe the biggest residential projects or medium scale commercial projects. This is it's a much larger dispersed project and kind of a foray into hospitality at a level that now we work on a bit more, but that was certainly the earliest going there for sure.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I love that it keeps coming back to doing the thing that you're doing, which is these amazing projects. And I'm glad we were able to cap it off with a couple of examples there because they are the reason why the firm exists. They're the reason why people want to work there. And it sounds like you've been pretty successful about, you're setting a baseline that is very high of like, this is where curious people come to work, and that the expression of that happens in the work that you ultimately deliver to your clients. And that's why the clients come too. So it's a really great kind of self-feeding flywheel of like the way that it all works. And I know that you're not without your challenges, right? Like it's still challenging to get everybody on the same page and to implement and adopt and keep abreast of all of the things that are flying at everybody at every moment, and especially now more than ever. So this has been a great conversation. I think there's a lot to dig out of it from the things that we talked about. So thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me today.
Thank you, Evan. It was a real honor to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, totally thrilling. Thanks, Evan. Great conversation, a real great perceptiveness. Thank you.
If you watched all the way to the end, thank you. That actually means a lot. I have two things I'd ask of you before you go. One, hit subscribe right now if you haven't already. It's totally free. It takes one click, and I'm really trying to get to 1,500 subscribers. We're not there yet, and every single one counts. If this show has been worth your time, that's the easiest thing you can do. Number two, if you want to go further, if you want to support independent coverage of this industry and get ad-free episodes of the podcast, plus my full Leadership Edge newsletter, head over to trxl.co and click the join button. The link is in the show notes. $12 a month, and you'll be one of the people who actually makes this possible. All right, that's a wrap. Subscribe, share it with someone who would get it, and I'll see you in the next one.